Hey, it's Ollie, and welcome back to the next installment in this series of videos where I'm showing you the exact activities and routines and methods that I'm using to learn languages every day in my core study time. Now, if you don't know what I mean by core study time, then go back and check out the first part of this series. I'll put a link below, because that will really help you, I think, conceptualize your study and focus down more on what you're doing. Now today we're going to be talking about reverse translation, which is one of my favorite activities. I've also heard it called bidirectional translation. I think that's what Luca Lampariello calls it. It's a well-established teaching technique, and it's something that I always used to give to students when I really wanted to either put them through their paces or give them something a little bit different, or give them a really holistic language activity that would highlight the gaps in their knowledge. It's really great as a teaching tool, but also very, very useful for self-study. Works very well as a self-study routine. So with that, let's dive in and have a look at exactly what to do. Now, as the name of this activity implies, this all focuses around translation, which is not everyone's cup of tea, but personally I find it very useful. You start off with a text of some kind in the language that you're learning, your target language, which we're going to call L2. Now, we'll talk a bit later about exactly what text to use, but the first step is to take that text and then to translate it into your mother tongue, which we're going to call the L1. Okay, so you take a text in the language you're learning and then you translate it into your mother tongue and you actually write it down like that. That's the first step. Now, what you're going to do next is you're going to cover up the original, and then you're going to take your translation, and then working from your translation, you are then going to translate it back into your target language. So it looks like this. So you start off, say you're learning French, you take a text in French, translate it into English. Once you've got the translation, you cover up the original, and then you translate from the English back into French. Okay. Now, this is it's tough because it tests a few different things, right? First of all, what you're doing is you're testing your understanding. Okay, so have you understood the text properly? And then what you end up with here in the English translation is basically, it's kind of like a list of concepts. It doesn't matter here whether you get the wording, whether it's a beautiful translation. What matters is you capture the ideas. Because then the real test is here. It's, can you take these ideas that you've written down in English, and can you put them back accurately into the language that you're learning? Once you've finished that, then the really instructional, informative part is when you come back and you compare what you've done here with the original. And then all the differences between the original French text and then the translation that you did back into the French, that shows you the state of your language knowledge, right? You will make mistakes, but those mistakes are super important because they show you everything that you do and don't know, right? Now, the important thing about this activity is that it goes way beyond comprehension. I think a lot of people tend to waste their study time by just focusing on like, can I understand this? Can I understand? What this activity does is it really focuses on, okay, can you not only understand it, but also, if say you're studying a grammar point, can you actually use that grammar point properly in the language? So it tests essentially this. Whatever it is that you're focusing on, can you express those concepts in the language that you're learning? Can you do it using correct grammar? And then finally, what are the gaps in my language? And the most important part of this whole activity is that once you've done this, the act of just doing it isn't enough. What you've got to do then is to sit down and look at all of the differences between what you've produced and the original, and that shows you what you've got to study. And you could, of course, repeat this and do it over and over again, improving those things each time. Now, there are lots of different lengths or different texts you could choose. If you're really advanced, what you can do is you could take, for example, a whole page or a whole article. But that's usually with this activity, the golden rule is shorter is better. You can start with just a paragraph, a short paragraph would be fine. Because simply it'll just take you too long if you do a whole article. If you're a beginner, you could work with a series of sentences, for example, maybe write 5. Let's say you're studying a particular grammar point, like the conditional tense in French or Spanish, for example. You could find a series of sentences in the conditional, write them out, and then use this as the source for the translation. The big mistake that people make with this is they try to do too much, because imagine a whole article. If you put that into English and then you have to translate that entire article back, you will be focusing in on words and a lot of detail, and it's just simply going to take you too long. And so the golden rule is it must be manageable. Smaller is much better, because then you can actually learn from it. Remember how we said that the most important thing is actually comparing your translation and the original? Well, you can't do that if you've got tons and tons of stuff to compare. So keep it small. You might like to just start with one paragraph and see what happens from there. All right. Now let me give you a little example of what that might look like, just to make this a bit more tangible. I've got something that I just pulled from the internet here, which is a little exchange in Spanish. So here in Spanish we've got "Si hubieras podido ir, yo habría ido también. Ya lo sé. Sé lo mucho que te gusta el patinaje." Which means, if you had been able to go, I would have gone too. And then, I know how much you like skating. Now this is, you've got a couple of difficult grammar concepts here. You've got the conditional here, and then you've got this sé lo mucho. So a couple of tricky grammar concepts that you might want to test in your Spanish. So the first thing that you do is you do a translation in English. So I'm going to write the English down on this piece of paper here. So once we've got the English translation written down, the next step is to hide the original, which, because of my ninja paper folding skills, we've already been able to do, and then work from this and to translate that back into Spanish. We could do that up here. It's a bit see-through, so you don't want to do that. But yeah, no, whatever. You can grab another piece of paper and just working just from the English, you then try to write the Spanish. And then once you've got your reverse translation of the Spanish, then what you do is you go back and get the original, and you can compare the two versions. Now in this case I've made a deliberate mistake to prove the point. So we've got the first two, so we've got "Si hubieras podido ir, yo habría ido también." So I've got that right. But then in the second bit I've got "Ya lo sé, sé cuánto te gusta el patinaje." But this bit here is wrong, because it should be "sé lo mucho que te gusta el patinaje." Okay? So what this little exercise has told me is that I'm not very confident or comfortable or familiar enough with this particular construction. So what I then might do is go back to the grammar book and have a read of that, or do some more exercises or something like that. So I hope that was useful. Let me know how you get on with reverse translation. It's one of my favourites. If you'd like to see all the other videos in this series, then there's going to be a link below in the description. Likewise, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for much more like this. And if you find the video useful, please share it with your friends. Alright then, see you back in the next video.